I think there's never been a more critical time in our country to focus on this topic of making sure that we have a workforce that's prepared for the future. We have to be able to provide the types of training, upskilling, and reskilling that's required with the flexibility that is needed for people who are already employed. We call them incumbent workers. When you think about traditional education, historically, it has been really designed around individuals who aren't working, who can go from their day jobs to a community college down the street. That's not possible with the incumbent worker population. They are pulling full loads at work every single day. They go home to take care of their families. And so being able to have support services that enable that in the right way, and I think is a big shift that has to happen.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Optimistic Outlook podcast. I'm Barbara Humpton, CEO of Siemens USA. As we continue exploring the promise of digital transformation, I want to shift our lens once again from the technology itself to the people who will shape and sustain the future of work. Because here's the truth. No matter how advanced our tools become, whether we're talking about AI, automation, or digital twins, it's people who will unlock their full potential. That's why one of the most important investments we can make today is in workforce development and reskilling. So, what does that look like in practice? How can employers better support workers, particularly in the skilled trades, as they navigate a rapidly changing economy? And how do we make learning not just accessible, but ongoing, future-focused, and business-aligned? To explore these questions, I'm joined by Bijal Shah, the CEO of Guild. Guild is America's leading talent development company, partnering with major employers to build the talent needed for today and a resilient workforce for tomorrow by connecting employees to real-world learning and support. Bijal stepped into the CEO role in 2023. She brings powerful insight into how companies can create accessible opportunities for growth, support working learners, and build more sustainable, future-ready workforces. Take a listen. Bijal, the theme of this episode is how we help people succeed in their careers in this moment of transformation driven by technology. Tell us more about what that means. Guild partners with major employers to create pathways for workers, particularly frontline and underserved workers. What have you learned about the power of education and reskilling to unlock the potential in that workforce? And why is now the moment when this is so critical?
I think there's never been a more critical time in our country to focus on this topic of making sure that we have a workforce that's prepared for the future. And if you talk to any CEO in the country today, it is also top of mind for them for a few different reasons. The first is we have baby boomers leaving our workforce. And when you think about manufacturing, you know all about this, Barbara, and you look at the demographics of the manufacturing sector inside the United States, we have a lot of individuals who are preparing or already leaving the workforce, and we don't necessarily have the pipeline behind it to help support our country and continue to drive manufacturing. When you talk to other businesses outside of manufacturing, healthcare is a great example. They suffer from the same talent gaps and shortages. And when you think about the rising cost of healthcare in this country and the number of individuals who are going to need healthcare related services, those are only going up. And so one of the biggest lessons at Guild that we've learned at Guild is actually that you have to think about two things when you think about upskilling and reskilling. The first is from the lens of the employer, which is what jobs are going to exist now and into the future, and how do we work backwards to make sure individuals can get upskilled and reskilled on pathways that actually lead to jobs on the other side. The second is thinking about the learner. Where are they starting? What are their current competencies? Have they tried school and failed before? What are the support services and other resources that need to go along with upskilling and reskilling workers in order to help ensure that they can actually take advantage of what is being offered to them through their employer, through other grants and services that actually lead to their ability to take advantage of those opportunities and see mobility and career paths pathways and agility in terms of their ability to move between different roles and opportunities inside their organization. I think both of those matter in order to support what is, I think, essential for our future workforce.
As we think about our frontline workers, and you mentioned both factory workers as well as healthcare, what's fascinating is it's true. The jobs are changing. They're changing quickly. And we have been told by those who are introducing new technology, including Siemens, that the pace of change is just going to increase. So this whole question of how do you go about continuous learning is top of mind for me. I mean, here's the question. If I'm in a job that's demanding and I'm putting a lot of time in, and yet I know that I've got to stay on the learning curve and keep things moving. Do you have any advice for us about how we can encourage employees to make the time to engage in that lifelong learning that we know is critical to all of our futures?
Yeah, I think there's probably three different things that employers can do to help encourage their employees. The first is we live in a world and environment today, especially when you think about younger generations in our workforce who want agency. And so being able to actually provide things in a way that feels like it's a benefit to the employee, that they have agency in signing up to take advantage of something, and that they are empowered to be able to do this, I think is really important. We spend a lot of time talking about mandatory things people have to do and mandatory training and mandatory, return to office as an example. But I actually think agency, our data shows that agency will drive more adoption and more willingness to engage because people feel like they're empowered to make the decision that is best for them. The second is accessibility. We have to be able to provide the types of training, upskilling, and reskilling that's required with the flexibility that is needed for people who are already employed. We call them incumbent workers, folks who already have jobs inside of your organization. They need the ability to be able to take advantage of these programs on their time and schedule. And when you think about traditional education, historically, it has been really designed around individuals who aren't working, who can go from their day jobs to a community college down the street. That's not possible with the incumbent worker population. They are pulling full loads at work every single day. They go home to take care of their families and to make sure that they're providing for the infrastructure that they need to outside of work. And so being able to have support services that enable that in the right way, bringing the learning content to the manufacturing facility or to the healthcare site or to the retail location, I think is a big shift that has to happen. And I think accessibility is key. So agency, we talked about, accessibility, we talked about. And then the third is the ability to make sure that that programming and content is relevant and is not just aligned for the skills someone needs tomorrow, but is aligned for driving agility and resiliency for them to be able to continue to learn and iterate and build on top of the skills that they're getting tomorrow. And so we talk about a concept called stackability, which is we want you to actually go and get certifications and programs that stack one on top of the other. Because skills are changing so quickly, your ability to continue to stack one credential on top of the other is going to be continue to be important. And we have to work with our learning partners and employers to break down historical learning content like degrees into more stackable, bite-sized certifications that people can stack on top of one another so that they continue to grow and learn and evolve. But it doesn't seem like this big, hairy, audacious thing to go and try to do.
And I often share the advice I got early in my career from a mentor at IBM who said career development is like mountain climbing. You're on the walk face, but it's only necessary. In fact, it's only advisable to you to move one hold at a time. So reach with a hand, reach with a foot, but keep 3 points on the rock at all times. And I think you're giving us some advice that would go hand in glove with that, which is you can learn what you need for that next foothold as you go. You don't have to know it while you're standing on the ground looking up at that rock face. So, so actually, you're taking me into a different area, which is this idea that we really are building an economy where we need more people in the workforce, and there's long been this concern about creating a gap between those who have the education and those who don't. Okay, it's becoming obvious to all of us that the former dream that everyone should get a 4-year degree isn't necessarily the right answer. In fact, then gaps have gotten wider. People have spent money on degrees that actually didn't help them get the opportunity they wanted. What strategies have you found effective to ensure that the advances that we're making create inclusive opportunities rather than widening existing gaps?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that's broken about our education system is actually the lending practices that go around it. When you think about student loan debt in this country, people don't feel like the degree has the ROI because they incurred so much debt going along the process of trying to get that degree, only to get a job on the other side that didn't offset the costs that they put in. I think there are a few things that we can be doing as a country to help abate those types of things, as well as think about the future and what's ahead. The first is what Guild, facilitates and supports, which is public-private partnership, where employers actually participate in the process of helping to offset the cost on behalf of their employees to go get educated. I think this does two things. One, it forces the employer to ask themselves, what skills, credentials, and degrees actually matter inside my organization, and which ones am I willing to fund and pay for on behalf of the employee, which I think is great. It shows a reinforcement of trying to make sure that the programming that you're offering lines up with where the future is of where your organization is going. The second thing I think that is really important is actually bringing employers now to the table in terms of what types of credentials, not just what credentials, but what type of content is really going to resonate to power my workforce of the future. By being part of the payer ecosystem, the employer now has a larger say in, here are the types of skills I need, here are the types of credentials I need, and here are the types of programming that I'm willing to pay for on behalf of my employee to actually help drive the future workforce. I also think it does a third thing, which is it realigns both the expectation of the employee as well as the expectation of learning institutions in this country on what actually matters in terms of the types of content and the types of skills that we are building for the future workforce, and how do we better get innovation out of our learning institutions to help drive things that are more near term as well as long term. And so we've now put the emphasis back on not everyone needs to follow the same pathway. Not everyone needs a degree. Everybody does need future aligned skills, and they need to know what skills are going to be relevant for the future. But now the employer has a seat at the table to have a conversation with learning institutions to help drive what that future is going to look like.
Bijal, what does that look like? How do you engage employers?
We work with a lot of employers across this country. We work with large leading employers in this country, and we spend a lot of time with them asking questions around what career pathways matter to you today. Like, what is a specific pathway that you think is important? Where do you have critical talent shortages inside of your organization? And who would you be willing to take a bet on in order to see them go into the role and then continue to evolve inside that role? To give you a very specific example, we've done a few things. We've worked with healthcare employers across the country to help design things like Nursing Start. So you can get started on a nursing pathway inside of your healthcare employer tomorrow, and you don't need a BA, a bachelor's in nursing, to do that. We can set you down the pathway to move in from a non-clinical role into a clinical role, first and foremost, and then we'll help you get certified and credentialed along the way to eventually become a nurse if that's your goal. You can also stop somewhere along that horizon and be like, actually, being a nursing assistant is good enough for me. And that's what I want to focus on. And I feel like I can provide for my family and do the right thing just by taking that pathway and that journey. Another one is we worked with a leading institution to design something called Pharmacy Start. There are a lot of pharmacy technicians, but we have a 5,000 person shortage on pharmacists. What is the best way to drive pharmacists in this country? Oh, take pharmacy technicians who've already shown an interest in becoming a pharmacy technician and actually put them on a pathway to become pharmacists. Now, to become a pharmacist, you actually do need your bachelor's degree, and then you need a master's degree, and then you need to actually become a pharmacist. And so, in that case, that's great. It's a highly regulated industry. It requires precision. It requires understanding a lot of different things about what it takes to be a pharmacist. And that's great. We should set you down that pathway, turn it into bite-sized, stackable credentials, and eventually get you from a pharmacy tech into becoming a pharmacist. The third is we worked with a leading manufacturing institute and said, can you take your master's degree program and unbundle those programs? We have a lot of semiconductor work that needs to happen in this country. We need people who understand things like hydraulics when we look at manufacturing facilities. We need people to understand what it takes to create data centers that can power the future of AI. All of that content lives inside your master's degrees inside of your institution. Can you unbundle your content? Here's a bunch of employers we've brought to the table who are willing to buy that unbundled content and willing to fund their employees getting smaller bundles of education. Will you work with us to unbundle that content if we bring employers to the table? Guess what their answer was, Barbara? Of course, we are willing to do that. We just need to make sure that employers are willing to engage with us on the other side, and we're willing to work with them to figure out how do we innovate on our content to get their employees the skills they'll need in order to power our manufacturing facilities go forward.
So, taking a traditional educational institution who might have thought, hey, my degree program is, in essence, my moat. This is the thing I uniquely provide to the world, and you've convinced them to unbundle it. I'm curious what their experience is. Do they still get the same number of full-time students enrolling in their master's program while also expanding the whole pie and getting access to students they never would have met otherwise?
We're not sure yet. And what actually matters in this situation is that those master's degree students won't come at all if they don't feel like they can get jobs on the other side. There's a lag between people getting these degrees and credentials and when you see whether or not it's working or not. But one thing I'm convinced of is we have to start with the job and work backwards. We have to be clear on what job exists, what those jobs require from a competency perspective, and then what credentials will actually lead to that competency. And that is the long-term view on making sure our education, employment, and learning systems are all aligned with what is needed for the future of work. And so I think they believe that too. I just think they don't want to rely on a single employer at a single moment in time, because if they shift their resources and their capacity for that one employer, and then that employer changes their strategy or direction, they're now left right with the bag. But if we can bring a consortium of employers to bear and bring the right schools to bear at the same time, I think there's a really great way to show like, hey, everyone's in this together. We have a win-win-win that can happen if we're all willing to engage in this conversation together.
Well, I think you're in the right place at the right time. I mean, it's clear the numbers are telling us we need more electrical engineers.
Yes.
That's for darn sure. And the fact that a university may not be able to work the business model that reaches individual companies, well, Guild has that capacity to reach multiple employers and then to be the convener, the aggregator. It actually makes it possible to pursue a different approach.
And when we talk about these schools, we're talking about Purdue, we're talking about Indiana Tech. We're not talking about, we're talking about institutions that have a history of building the economic engine of this country and their willingness to be adaptable and flexible to ensure that they can meet the needs of what this country needs right now. I do think we live at this time and space where all sides are seeing the power of being able to come together And our goal at Guild is just to make that process more efficient, to make sure that we align the business model for a win-win-win for all parties, and that we make sure everyone takes away something from the situation that actually drives progress.
That is so exciting. And to hear how amenable the institutions are. We hear a lot about what's going on in academia these days. And one thought is that, oh, they really know their model and they're sticking to it. But what you're showing us is that there's adaptability here. I'm curious about another dimension of adaptability. We talk about it a lot this in the whole concept of lifelong learning, the idea that maybe it's not just the 20 somethings who are getting these degrees. Now, I recently spoke to some manufacturing leaders, and a point I made is that we aren't competing against each other. We're all competing against the megatrends that are impacting societies everywhere. One of those being this aging population. Everywhere we look across skilled trades, we see older workers retiring, and there's a real struggle to replace them with a new generation of talent. What do you think business leaders need to understand about the implications of the worker shortage? And then what should we be doing to broaden talent pools?
I think what you just said is so critical for every business leader to understand. We are at a moment, I think, that is a borderline talent crisis. And in order for us to be able to actually come out the other side with a strong economy and a strong foundation for this country, we as business leaders actually have to be willing to work together. And you do see some business leaders doing this today. We have some employers who are not in the healthcare space who actually fund their employees getting healthcare credentials, not because they are going to then employ them as a nurse. They're in retail, they're not in healthcare, but because they believe that the power of what they are doing drives a stronger economy overall. People who have the right skills and certifications and credentials can get jobs. Those people get jobs and they spend money. Those people spend money at retailers. And the ability to make sure that people continue to be employable is so important. And so, first and foremost, Barbara, I would say that this is a collective call to action for leaders to work together to try and ensure that they do both right by their fiduciary responsibility as an employer and the CEO of their company, but also making sure that they're making the right investments to drive the broader economy in this country. I think working together is so important at this moment in time.
I'm curious whether you have some examples of that. Have you seen some good cases as Guild has reached out into different communities?
Yeah, we are working right now with a city, and I can't tell you all the details of that. But one of the things we're looking at is how do we take existing workforce development models and reduce the administrative burden that is required to bring local institutions and government funding and employer funding together? And how do we braid that in a way that actually drives people to get jobs in the areas that we need? So, without giving away too much, we are piloting right now a use case where we brought an employer who has jobs to the table, academic institution that has the ability to upskill and reskill folks in what I would describe as first line or on ramps to nursing pathways. And then we're working with the local city to make sure traditional dollars that have gone to these types of causes could be utilized for this type of funding approach, and braiding all three of those things together to actually drive people getting placed in jobs. We are talking to states right now who have a huge focus on revitalizing manufacturing or revitalizing their local economy, and how we can help, again, reduce the administrative burden and actually bring to bear a consortium of employers to talk about what skills are needed, what learning is required, and what credentials will help these individuals get jobs so that we can move more rapidly and at a faster clip to actually drive getting people the skills they need and placed into the jobs that already exist today that employers are having trouble filling.
I heard Ed Bastian, CEO of Delta, say at CES this year, Partnership is the new leadership. And I got to tell you, Bijal, just hearing you talk about this, it's the fact that you bring this kind of systems thinking to the work that you do. This is absolutely going to accelerate the progress we make on workforce development.
I
Exciting.
Thank you. I think that's right. I also think it requires, being willing to learn quickly and being adaptable. We're not going to get everything right. We don't always get everything right, but the more we can create faster patterns and cycles of learning what works, what doesn't work, and then iterating, I think the quicker we will help actually drive the future of what this country needs.
Bijal, it's been great to have you on the podcast. And I like to end every show with an optimistic outlook, and I'd love to get yours. When it comes to the future of work and learning, what are you most optimistic about? And what gives you hope that we can build more resilient, equitable, and future ready organizations?
We have the opportunity to work with leading Fortune 500 companies where their CHROs, their chief human resource officers, and their CEOs care about this topic. You are trying to bring to light solutions that can actually work. That's what actually makes me optimistic that we can power the workforce of the future.
Bijal, it's great to have you on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Barbara.
What I take away from this conversation is just how essential it is that we meet workers where they are with flexible pathways, real support, and a commitment to lifelong learning. At Siemens, we share that vision. We believe in creating a culture where every employee, whether on the factory floor or behind a computer screen, has the tools to grow, adapt, and thrive. Like Guild, we're thinking hard about digital transformation and how it can serve everyone. If you'd like to learn more about our workforce development efforts, check out the resources in the show notes. And as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your comments on LinkedIn or wherever you're listening. Thanks again for joining us.
Please follow us on social media and on your favorite podcasting platform. Thank you for tuning in.